The Necromancer. Harness the ability to summon the dead and command them to fight for you. That's right, it's here. The ultimate solo Magicka Necromancer. This build was requested by many of my community wanting a build that makes solo content look easy and can still run through hard group content without swapping a thing, and sticking to our usual no trial gear and without mythics. And that's what we've done. Taking advantage of the Necro's amazing skills and passives, we have walked away with an unbelievable build. This thing was shockingly good, so good in fact, that on the first test run through Vateshran Hollows, we took home an easy Spirit Slayer live on stream. I had actually put together this build a couple of weeks ago, but hadn't got around to completing it till this week, and after much testing and learning about the class, I feel confident in calling this the ultimate solo build. There will also be a written guide in the description for those who would like that as well. Necros, known for their sustained tankiness and huge damage through dots, or damage over time, have always been near the top for any type of build, for PvE or even PvP. However, due to skill combinations, the Necro itself can be a little bit intimidating, but don't worry, I got you covered. In this video, we're going to cover everything from race, attributes, mundus, consumables, gear, skills, champion points, rotation, and at the end, an explanation of why some choices were made and how exactly to take advantage of it all. So let's start with race. First, Dark Elf. Dark Elf has some great bonuses to weapon and spell damage, but also has bonuses to max magicka and max stamina. Being high in damage output, but still keep bonuses for stam works so well for this build. Khajiit. Khajiit has some of the best stats for a solo race, increasing health, stamina, and magicka recovery, also increasing maximum health, magicka, and stamina, and on top of that, increases critical damage and critical healing by 12%. Then High Elf. While High Elf technically has the most damage in front of the Dark Elf, that difference is less than 1%. Specializing in Magicka, it has bonuses to max mag and weapon and spell damage. It also has the ability to restore Magicka or stamina based on whichever is lowest. You also take 5% less damage when using any ability with a cast time or channel, but because of its lack of bonuses in other ways and just specializing in Magicka, I'm going to do something a little different this week. I think that there is an equally as good, if not better race, so I'll be tying third with something unique, and that is the Orc. The Orc, thought of mostly as a stamina race, is not quite the case anymore, especially for this build. The Orc gets a max stamina increase and a max health increase, and when you deal damage, you heal for over 2k health every 4 seconds. This is a really nice thing for a solo build. And finally, increasing our weapon and spell damage, as well as reducing the cost of sprint by 12% and increasing the movement speed of sprint by 10%. It's honestly such a good choice for a solo build. And last we have the Breton. The Breton is the king of Magicka sustain and a great choice for newer players looking for something super easy, increasing max Magicka, spell resistance, and mag recovery, and reducing the cost of Magicka abilities by 7%. But all that being said, race only matters when you're min-maxing or pushing endgame content, so please, by all means, choose whatever you like. It will still be fine. Attributes and mundus. For this build, we're leaning into our magic damage. This means we're going all 64 points into Magicka. For our mundus, we'll be going with the Thief. We'll have our source of breach, and we'll want as much crit as we can squeeze out. For consumables, starting off with our food, Jewels of Mizrul. This is a very cheap food that we can start using from level 1 onwards. You can buy it from a guild trader, or if you don't want to make it yourself, you can always just buy stacks of the food itself for very cheap. Onto potions. Our first choice for potions is going to be Essence of Spell Power, granting us 3 major buffs that will help us a lot. First, Major Sorcery, increasing our spell damage by 20%, Major Prophecy, increasing our spell critical chance, and Major Intellect, which increases our Magicka recovery by 30%. Because these potions are pricey at times, I recommend while you're running around doing easier content, just use Tri-Stat pots or even trash Magicka potions will do fine. Save the good stuff for the harder stuff, solo arenas, dungeons, or even vet trials. To make Essence of Spell Power pots yourself, you'll want to combine Cornflower, Lady Smock, and Water Hyacinth with some Lorcan's Tears. Also remember to take the passive from the alchemy tree called Medicinal Use. This passive will increase our potions effects by 30%, which will extend our uptime on buffs and allow us to maintain 100% uptime on them. For gear, we're going to be a little particular about this. I'll say where to put each piece, but at the end I will have a table to make it as easy to see as possible. Starting with Pillar of Nirn, dropping out of Falkreath Hold, this one will be put on our body pieces in Divines, and we will have a Flame Staff on our front bar, in the precise trait with the Flame Damage enchantment. This is the set, giving us max stam, crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and when we deal damage we create a fissure underneath the enemy for 1 second, dealing bleed damage to all enemies within 2.5 meters and causing them to bleed for additional bleed bleed damage for another 10 seconds. This can happen every 10 seconds, giving us 100% uptime. For the body pieces for this one, we're going to go chest and pants, and then one small piece, so gloves, belts, or shoes. Our other 5 pieces is going to be Gormans. I love this set with the right food combination. Dropping out a Galen, this is the overland set, making it very easy to obtain. This one gives us crit chance again, and spell damage. And while you have a food buff active, our critical damage and critical healing is increased by 13%. This set is too good for a solo set, provided you can match the right food. We'll be putting this set on our jewelry and our 2 little pieces we have left, so belts, shoes, or gloves. Our jewelry will be infused with spell damage glyphs and our body with divines. Next will be our Ice Heart monster set, dropping out of Direfrost Keep. This set is too good. Putting it in light divines with max magicka enchantments, this one increases our crit, and then when we deal critical damage, we have a 20% chance to gain a damage shield that absorbs 5,000 damage for 6 seconds. Also, while the damage shield holds, we deal frost damage to all enemies within 5 meters of you every second, and this can proc every 6 seconds, making it very useful. On our back bar, we're going to be putting the Maelstrom Staff in the infused trait with a weapon damage glyph. This set increases the damage our Wall of Elements does. You do not need the perfected version. And here's an example of the best way I think to do it. This can all sound a little bit complicated, but you can mix and match the things you want though. It's a 4 light and 3 medium on the body setup. It doesn't truly matter what pieces, but I recommend doing 2 of the medium on the chest and the legs as they are the biggest, providing the most resistance. And on the body, it will be all divines with max magicka enchantments. With that out of the way, let's dive into skills. Starting with Unnerving Boneyard out of the Gravelord skill tree, desecrate the ground at the target location, dealing big frost damage over 10 seconds, and applying major breach to enemies within, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 5,948. It can also consume a corpse on cast to deal 30% more damage. Allies standing in the graveyard can also activate the Grave Robber synergy, dealing huge frost damage to enemies in the area and heal for the damage done. This skill is fantastic for both breach and big frost damage. Next, this was a tough one, but we chose Summoner's Armor, coming out of the Bone Tyrant skill line, wrapping ourselves in Hardened Bone, granting us Major Resolve, which increases our physical and spell resistance by 5,948 for 20 seconds. But while active, it reduces the cost of Blast Bones, Skeletal Mage, and Spirit Mender by 15%. This is super important for this build, as sustain is so important. Combining that with our Resolve makes us nice and tanky at the same time, and that leads us to our Spam Ball. The only way to sustain super nicely was to use Venom Skull, coming out of the Gravelord skill tree. This is a stamina morph of this one, lobbing an explosive skill at an enemy, dealing really good poison damage. Every 3rd cast of this, it deals 20% increased damage. And while slotted, casting any Necromancer ability while you're in combat will count towards the 3rd cast. It's really important not to overcast this one, but I'll explain when and how in the rotation section. Next, the bread and butter of all the Necros, Stalking Blast Bones, out of the Gravelord skill tree, summoning a flaming skeleton from the ground after 2.5 seconds. The skeleton runs after the target and explodes when it gets close, dealing huge flame damage to it and all nearby enemies. Every second the skeleton spends chasing someone, its target increases the damage of the next explosion by 10%, up to a maximum of 50% more damage. This also creates a corpse in its death for our other abilities like Graveyard. This one is so important to keep up, and in my opinion really is what makes the Necromancer more difficult than other classes to play. I'll explain more in the rotation as well, but the basic rule is you want to cast this every 3rd skill if timed right. So 2 skills and then come back for Blast Bones. Moving on to our 5th skill, Mystic Siphon, out of the Gravelord skill tree. Violently draining the last spark of life from a corpse, dealing massive shock damage over 20 seconds to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. You also gain 150 health, magicka, and stamina recovery while siphoning the corpse, and while slotted, our damage is increased by 3%. And then for our ultimate, we're going with Flawless Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild skill line. This is here as a buff, primarily here for 2 things. 1, the Slayer passive increasing our weapon and spell damage for each Fighter's Guild ability slotted, and Banish the Wicked, which generates us 3 ultimate whenever we kill an enemy. These passives can be found in the Fighter's Guild tree. Moving on to our back bar, first up we have Unstable Wall of Fire from the Destruction Staff skill line, slamming our staff down to create an unstable flaming barrier in front of you, dealing flame damage to enemies in the target area every 1 second. Burning enemies take 10% more damage from this ability, and when it ends, it explodes, dealing a nice amount of flame damage. This is buffed by our Maelstrom staff and will help keep the glyph on it procced. Next, Skeletal Arcanist out of the Gravelord skill tree, unearthing a Skeletal Mage from the dirt to fight by your side for 20 seconds. The mage attacks the closest enemy every 2 seconds, dealing shock damage to them and all others nearby. This also creates a corpse. Onto Channeled Acceleration from the Psijic skill line, our source of Minor Force. This one allows us to bend time and space around you to gain Major Expedition for 12 seconds, and Minor Force for a full minute, increasing our movement speed by 30% and our critical damage by 10%. Extremely handy, and we only need to cast it once a minute. Our Force skill, Spirit Guardian from the Living Death tree, conjuring a ghostly spirit will do your bidding and stay by your side for 16 seconds. The spirit also heals you or the lowest ally around you every 2 seconds, restoring decent health. While active, 10% of the damage you take is transferred to the spirit instead. This also creates a corpse on death, giving us great mitigation and solid heals. This is a must. For our 5th skill, I've gone with Resolving Vigor from the Assault skill line. This one is our oh hell no emergency heal, letting loose a battle cry, instilling yourself with Resolve and healing for huge health over 5 seconds. And after casting, we get Minor Resolve, increasing our physical and spell resistance by 2,974 for 20 seconds. Truly the nicest heal. You can get this one by doing next to no PvP. Moving on to our final thing, our ultimate, Fiery Rage from the Destructive Staff skill line. This thing creates a cataclysmic storm at the target location that builds for 2 seconds, then lays to waste all enemies in the area, dealing huge flame damage every second for 7 seconds. With a giant radius, this in my opinion is the best ultimate for this build in solo instances. Now that does it for skills, onto champion points. Nice and quick. Starting with the blue tree, our first choice will be Wrathful Strikes, increasing our weapon and spell damage. Fighting Finesse, increasing our critical damage and critical healing. Third, Master at Arms, increasing our damage done with direct damage attacks. And fourth, Biting Aura, increasing the damage done with our area of effect attacks. For our red tree, we're sticking with the classic. Balanced Vitality, increasing our max health. Fortified, increasing our armor. Rejuvenation, increasing our health, magicka, and stamina recovery. And our fourth spot and our flex spot, I recommend Slippery for newer players, which automatically breaks us free for free. This can happen once every 21 seconds. This can be very handy. So let's explain the rotation. Starting with our pre-buff, Channeled Acceleration, Summoner's Armor, Skeletal Mage, Spirit Guardian, and then Vigor. Now we're going to go on to our damage. First, we're going to cast our Blast Bones, then Elemental Rage if you've got it, followed by a Wall of Fire, Unearthing Boneyard, Venom Skull, Blast Bones, Mystic Siphon, Venom Skull twice, Blast Bones again, and then another 2 Venom Skull, and then start again and apply as needed. This can all sound a little bit complicated, but what I've done is pretty much lay out all of the abilities until everything's up. This is what I have found being the easiest and best way to maximize your efficiency. However, it takes a lot of practice. Don't let it intimidate you. Just take your time to slowly apply them as you can. Your highest priority are your buffs. Summoner's Armor, Wraith, and only if you can, Channeled Acceleration. Second to that is Blast Bones. Always make sure you have your Blast Bones up. The trick is to cast it every 3rd skill or even every 4th if you can. After that, it's your other things. Skeletal Mage, heal where you can, cast your ult wherever you can, and that's about it. The Necromancer requires a lot of bar swapping and back and forth. At first, this can feel like a lot, but I encourage you to try not to stress over it too much, just have fun with it, start off slow, and practice where you can. The things that make this build really stand out is a ton of passive healing, mitigation, sustain, and they break down their enemy. Passives that help with this are almost all of the necro passives. Starting in the Gravelord tree, reusable parts. When our Blast Bones, Skeletal Mage, or Spirit Meta dies, the cost of the next one is reduced by 50%. Death Knell increases our critical strike chance in Execute, which in this case is under 25%. Dismember increases our physical and spell resistance by 1500, and of course Rapid Rot, which increases our damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. In our Bone Tyrant tree, we have Death Gleaning, which gives us mag and stand back whenever an enemy we're in combat with dies, as long as we have one of the abilities slotted. Disdain Harm, reducing the damage we take from damage over time abilities by 15%, while we have a Bone Tyrant ability active, and Health Avarice, which increases your healing received by 2% for each Bone Tyrant ability slotted. And even Last Gap, that's just a flat max health increase. Moving on to the Living Death, we have Corpse Consumption. When we use an ability on top of a corpse, we get 10 ultimate every 6 16 seconds. An Undead Confederate, while we have a Blast Bone, Skeletal Mage, or Spirit Mender active, your health, magicka, and stamina recovery is increased by 200. There's a couple more, but I've been talking enough. I really recommend you guys read through your passives for all of your skill trees. There's so much to the Necro. They are extremely fun to play and very useful in all content. They can take a bit of practice to master, but once you got it, you'll be loving it. And that's about it for this video. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments or pop over to the stream or even ask in Discord. Links to all of those will be in the description below along with the written guide. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more builds and guides. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.